皆様こんにちは。SV ジャパンです。本日はお時間をいただきありがとうございます。今回ご紹介する Si ビジョンは2000年代初頭に開発されて、フィリップス社やブラウン社などヨーロッパの大手電機メーカーや自動車メーカーでユニークな製品評価技術として利用されてきました。日本国内では2007年、私ども SV ジャパンが初めて紹介して以来、いくつかの国内メーカーとともに多くのオリジナル機能を新たに開発してまいりました。今回はサウンテック社の技術営業責任者ラルフ・シュベート・ペーガーさんに、私どもの主力ソリューションの一つである Si ビジョンの基礎事項を具体的な解析事例を交えて解説していただきます。それではラルフさん、よろしくお願いします。
Hello, my name is Ralf Schwedfeger. I'm working for Soundtech in Göttingen, Germany, since more than 20 years. I have studied physics in the Third Institute for Physics, Sound and Vibration in Göttingen. Let us start with an overview about Si Vision. You see here the Si Vision started with the sound already loaded. And let me explain what we see in this window. The y-axis is a normal standard dB axis, while the x-axis is a logarithmic frequency axis. So in the moment we see here a screenshot, a shot of this sound at a certain time point. Here we see this green background are this noisal component, that means in dB over frequency. And here we have some red lines. These red lines means that you hear the sound at this frequency as a tonal component. That means these tones can be perceived by the human ear in a separate way. So you will hear tones at this frequency. Here we have a small window for the readout, and the next tone close to my cursor is 117 Hertz, and here we have 154 Hertz, and so on. So, and what we see are these blue backgrounds, and these blue backgrounds are the ratings for the tonal components relative to the background noise. So that means the green noise is the background for these tones. And for example, here we see that this red line goes up almost to the third blue line. And here we see we have the score, so these blue lines are these ratings of these tones, how loud we can perceive these tones. And here we see this tone can be perceived with a rating of 3. Here we have another line that's coming out in dB much more, but this rating is not higher, because these blue lines are going here to low frequency, to higher values. So, or in other words, in low frequencies, the perception of tonal components is less dominant than in the mid-range or in the higher range, and for very high frequency, the perception of tonal components is getting less as well. So let us check here. For example, here we have in this window we see at this frequency very close to 80 Hertz. It's here the noise is at a level 53.6 dB, and the tones is at the level almost 67 dB. So that means the difference here is about 14 dB. That is a lot, but the score is 2.8. And here we have a tonal component that comes out only, let us look at the difference, 53 to 56.3. So it's about 3 dB, but this tonal component can be perceived by the human ear with the same dominance. So that means both tones have the same perception by the human ear. So now we have seen the background noise level, we have seen the tonal components, and the blue shapes are the ratings of these tonal components. And here we have another thing, we have here the shapes of this yellow background. And this yellow background means the modulations. So what are modulations? Modulations represents the time structure of the signal. So if there is no time structure, the modulations will be zero or at least very low. So normal noise will have almost no modulations if you have white or pink noise. And for technical sounds, you do have this kind of modulations. This gives a certain, let's say, color of the sound. So it's not easy to have an expression for this phenomenon. Okay, let us start the playback just to have a short overview for this special sound. I already have prepared some different sounds, and at the letter A I have the sound of an aggregate. This is an aggregate in addition to an engine, and the sound was sent by university to me, and I should rate it. So at about 10 seconds you will hear a difference. So I will start the playback. So I hope you could hear the difference at about 10 seconds, the dominance of this aggregate that was switched off at 10 seconds, and the dominance of the sound, let's say the rattling, changes a lot. And if you check the yellow background changes in this frequency range and also about around 2 kilohertz. Here's 2 kilohertz, and here's from 4 to 10 kilohertz. It changes a lot. So let us start the playback again. Okay, I hope you have heard the difference when the aggregate was switched off at about 10 seconds. So I have focused on these modulations. The other components of the sound are also dominant, but these components does not change so much. So what changes are these yellow background, the modulations in the sound, and what we can do now that we can go to these modulations and we can add a filter to reduce these modulations. So let me say plus. So in the moment we have here a filter in this frequency range. These are this yellow and orange start and end point. We can see it here. The middle is 1 kilohertz, and it starts from 500 hertz and goes up to 1500 hertz. It works on the modulations, this filter, and here we have this filter curve, a broadband filter with a rather high slopes. So what I said, we should go to 4000 Hertz and go to rather high frequencies. And maybe we can also add another filter at about 2 kilohertz. So first of all, we can reduce these modulations by putting this level down. So now it's minus 20 dB. And you see here it's minus 20. And this is the maximum of these filters that works. This is really a lot. 20 dB filtering is a world. So the change of these modulations is from a certain percentage. So modulations are given in a percentage of this noise background. And now we have scaled these modulations down to 20 dB. So first of all, we can have a subjective comparison. So let us focus at the time point when the aggregate is running. So at time 10 seconds it is switched off. And here let us start a little bit earlier range. Now the playback will done with So let me put the filter on and off, and I hope you will hear the difference as well as you will see it while the background is going up and down, the yellow one. So I hope you have heard the difference, but we can put the lower frequency start here to a lower value. So let's go here, let's say from 800 Hertz. So these are the carrier frequencies of these modulations. Now it starts at about 758 Hertz and it goes up to 13 kilohertz. And let me now play back the signal, switch the filters on and off. So I hope you can hear the difference. The difference is much more prominent if you use a headphone, but you should also hear it with the ears of an expert, the difference of the sound. So we can switch the sound file we are using. For example, we can go to a gear tone. This is the tone of a gearbox during a rundown. This is a phenomena that you will have sometimes, that the gear tone is coming out when you decrease the velocity, and during the rundown the gear makes a certain sound. So maybe you have heard this tone, this is very dominant. Of course, here you have a tone as well, but this is a tone coming out at lower frequencies, and the score is rather high, but in this case, to be honest, it is not the sound I'm talking about. I think this low frequency tone coming from the pistons from the machine at a rather low frequency, but here we have a sound coming out, and in the moment at 541 Hertz, and the score is also rather high. It's 5.75. So the sound is coming also out at about 12 dB. So this is a sound that you will hear definitely rather high. So just remembering, the blue background lines are the lines of the equal loudness. So a tone that coming out to a certain line at any frequency will perceive it in the same manner. So what I can do now, what I want to do now, that I want to filter this certain tone. This can be done in two ways. First of all, we are now in the frequency domain. At this x-axis, we have the frequency in a logarithmic scale. And let me go change the filter to the filter core for the tones. And let me play back. So you see, at certain time points it works perfectly. So now this tone is definitely gone away. So if I switch this filter on and off, or if I change this here, the tone is coming out and off. Okay, but we have a problem because the frequency is changing for this filter. So if I switch it on, this filter does not work anymore because the filter frequency is changing with the speed or with the RPM. So let us have a look at the RPM. We are, in the moment, we are at 2740 RPM, and this filter does not work at this frequency anymore. So I definitely want to filter this tone without filtering other tones. But this tone is changing in frequency. So what I want to do now, I switch from the frequency domain. First of all, I deactivate this filter. And I go to order analysis. So here I have an RPM, and I can switch the frequencies to orders. And in the moment we see that this tone is coming here out at an order of 11. Order of 11 usually is not part of the engine, and we can check here. Here we have an order of 2.5. So I think this is related to a 5-cylinder car, that every rotation, let's say in every 2 rotations, all 5 cylinders are exploding. And that means per rotation, 2.5 cylinders are exploding, and it gives the sound and making this order at 2.5. So, but now we can focus on this tonal component. After switching to the order analysis, we have switched this to this order axis, and at the 11th order, we see here a very dominant tone that is, of course, our problem tone that we want to focus on. So, and now, if I now play back, I expect that the 11th order will not change. Prominent, so it does not change when the RPM is changing. So that means that this tone is related to the rotation of the engine, or in this case to the rotation of the gear. So that means it is a gear that should have, I think it will have 11 teeth, and each teeth makes a certain sound, and if it's in a periodic way, the activation, you will have the 11th order. And now we can have a filter. So if I go to the tonal component, I add a filter. I can switch the filter as well to the order analysis. And I do not need a broadband filter. I just need a filter in a very sharp frequency range, and I can go to the 11th order. So here. And now I can decrease it, and I expect a very sharp filter that will filter just this tone. Tone is gone. It's completely gone. So I can play around. I will play back again, and I will switch on and off this filter in this order domain. And now it is gone. So we have had here an example for a tonal component that is related to the RPM, and it's the 11th of the frequency that comes from the RPM, and of course this cannot be an engine. It does not have 11 cylinders. I strongly expect that this tone comes from the gearbox. And now we can focus in the gearbox on a gear with 11 teeth that makes this sound. Just switching it on and off again. A very short time point, and it has a very low score. It's under 1, so I think that we should damp this tone. Here we have this dampening at about 11 dB, minus 11 dB, so this is a lot. So I think this cannot be done with the isolation. You should really definitely work on the origin of the sound that is definitely a gear. So here I have another example in Si Vision. This is a sound that is acquired from an engine, from a generator, gas generator, running in a stationary mode with a constant RPM. And first of all, let us hear to the file. So at the first glance, it is not so very special. But there is a certain sound in the more higher frequency range at about 3 kilohertz. Maybe we can focus on if we can hear it. So maybe you have heard here's a certain resonance coming out. So maybe you are not sure whether this is the correct part of the sound we should focus on. So what we can do, we can use a filter that is only working for the noise. So let us change the filter curve. First of all, let us the filter add, and now we can go to this frequency range, use a filter type that is more like a Henning window. So again, we can switch on and off this filter to hear the difference. Okay, what we can do, if we do not have heard it, we can also increase this noise to focus on the frequency range. When switching the filter on and off, you will hear the difference now very clearly. So this problem can be solved by only using a noise filter, a classical noise filter. We have found this resonance manually, but there is also a possibility to add a filter that will automatically detect the most dominant resonance. So I may show you by switching first off this filter and add a new one with the different characteristics also for the noise component. And here is one that will check the most dominant resonance in a certain frequency range. And you see it automatically smooths the spectrum. It detects the frequency, and it also detects the level that the filter should work. It is adapted interactively to the sound. I can show you by playback again. So this is a very clever filter that makes it very easy to smooth the spectrum. So for example, if I add another filter of this type, it will detect the next strongest hearable resonance, and in the moment it is here around 600 Hertz. Okay, so just as a summary, in this case we have used a filter only for the noise, and we could smooth the spectrum that the sound increases in quality a lot. When do I use SI Vision? I do use SI Vision to understand the sound when I come to a customer or a sound is sent to me by a customer and I want to understand the problem he is talking about. So once we have filtered and subjective checked that we are talking about the same things, and afterwards we can be sure that we are talking about the same part of the problem. So we can use these different filters for different parts of the sound, and with all these kinds of filtering and changing the sound, we can come close to each other what we are talking about and what is the origin of the sound. So, for example, tonal components are in most cases related to the RPM. So it's very often it is multiples of the RPM. So once you have a tonal component, you have to understand where it is coming from by checking the frequency and detecting which part is running with this frequency. So we have had the gearbox example, and the reason, the origin of the sound, the problem was the 11th order. So usually this is not a problem of the motor, this is usually a problem that comes with the gearbox. And if you have modulations and the modulations are gone when you switch off a certain aggregate, okay, it's clear, it's coming from the aggregate, and you do not have to check the parts by the RPM. You just have to check whether there is a hard contact, there is something making this kind of rattling. And if you have a kind of resonance phenomena or a phenomena coming from a broken bearing, then usually you will see it in the change of the noisal shape and some resonances coming out in this background noise. So I use it for all kinds of consulting as well as for training, as well as very often also for beginners in acoustics to understand how to work with, what do I have to work on, where do I have to work on, what is the problem with this sound. And in SI Vision, you directly see what you hear, and you do not see something strange that you do not hear, like it is very often done in the spectrum. So if you have a spectrum and there are some certain lines coming out, you do not know where to work on. In SI Vision, all these things are displayed in the way how the human ear will perceive it. So this is why we make these non-linear calculations in SI Vision to understand how loud a human ear will perceive the sound. In this example, for example, these very different loud tonal components, but together with these blue ratings, you get a correct score to understand what is the problem and what is the tonal component I have to work on. Or you really get the percentage of the modulations to understand, okay, this gives a certain, let's say, color of the sound. It's something rattling or squealing or whatever with the sound that you have to take care. Or you will have some resonances, some peaks in these noisal components coming out that the human ear will have attention to. So with the filtering and the interactive subjective rating, you can directly check that you are right and you are working on the correct thing. Furthermore, you can use SI Vision in the test mode for end-of-line testing. And for many more things, you can use it in a, let's say, more expert way You can check the modulation frequencies to get an idea where the sound origin is coming from, and so on. I hope I could give a good overview over SI Vision, and you have fun to work with it. So have a nice workshop. Bye bye from Göttingen, Germany. Ralf Schwertfeger.
皆様、いかがでしたでしょうか。ラルフさんには平易な言葉でSIビジョンのエッセンスを解説いただくようにお願いしましたが、少しでも皆様の参考にしていただければ幸いです。ラルフさんが最後にまとめた用紙を今一度日本語で整理すると、SIビジョンは何が問題かを理解できる。SIビジョンは問題の認識を関係者で共有できる。SIビジョンは問題の発生源を特定もしくは推定できる。SIビジョンは問題を見える化できる。SIビジョンは主観的評価と客観的評価を同時に行える。具体的には、例えば私どもに認識される異常音が必ず純音、変動音、筐体域ノイズのいずれかの成分として抽出することができます。したがって、通常の周波数バンドパスフィルターのように音響データそのものが変質してしまうこともありません。それでは皆様、次の機会にまたお会いしましょう。ご視聴ありがとうございました。